Hey, everybody. Thanks for coming back to another episode of the Your Gray Matters podcast. My name is Jason, here as always with your host, my dad, Neil. Hey, Dad, how you doing?
I am terrific. Hi, everybody.
We've got a great episode for you this week. We've got an expert sports bettor, Harley Redlick, on. Tell us about why you wanted to have Harley on today.
Sports betting is huge. And we are lucky to have Harley on because he's extremely successful with this. But why I love this gentleman is because he's willing to teach others how to do it. This is an amazing conversation. Who knew that there's so much to the industry of gambling, especially in sports?
Well, we hope you tell us about what you learned in the comments. We hope you check out the companion blog, and we really hope that you hit the subscribe button below me. It looks just like this, and you can go ahead and listen to this week's episode of the Your Gray Matters podcast.
We will wager that you will love this.
Welcome to Your Gray Matters, the podcast that unveils the miracles already amongst us. Here, we believe that the human mind cannot be defeated. Tune in to discover the fascinating people with extraordinary stories, innovative products, and groundbreaking services. With your host, Neil Silvert, who's earned his gray hair and still has use of his gray matter.
Hi, everybody. I'm Neil from the Your Gray Matters podcast. Welcome back. We hope that you had a great week. As you know, we like to bring you great people and great things that exist, but maybe you're not aware of them. And I've been curious for years about betting, gambling, sports betting. I don't do really any of them, but I'm fascinated by them because it's such a huge industry. And I'm going to ask our guests later if industry is actually the right word. I am thrilled to introduce you today to Harley Redlick. Harley is a successful sports bettor, but he's also a media personality. He has a passion for improving knowledge in the sports betting space. And that's why I asked him on. Harley has always been open to teaching people about the sports betting space, and I wanted him on. He did a weekly broadcast with Jory Middlestad, a legend of Toronto sports radio, where he provides picks and explains betting concepts to sharps, squares, and newbies. I got to get the definition of that one later. Harley has been virtually cut off. Get this, everybody, cut off by a number of legal Ontario sports books for winning too much money. He's cashed millions in prize money wagering against the OLG, the Ontario Lottery. He has a law degree from Osgoode Hall and an MBA from Rotman School of Management. Harley co created and served as co program director for the Osgoode Hall Professional Development Gaming Law Certificate. And we're going to talk about that. He's lectured on sports betting in that program, and then he served as an adjunct professor at Osgoode Hall Law School, where he taught gambling law. He's written for Yardbarker and Sun Media on issues related to sports betting and published a case study on successful betting arbitrage for the prestigious Ivy School of Business. Harley was a panelist at the inaugural Betting on Sports in America conference. I sat on the Canadian Gaming Summit sports betting panel twice and at SIMGA's last Canadian conference. He served as a guest on air expert for TSN Edge, CFRB News, Doyle's Guaranteed Money, and Rogers Inside the Lines. His Twitter handle is at Sharp Edge Picks, and we'll be posting that for you. Harley, welcome to Your Gray Matters podcast.
Thanks for having me on, Neil.
I'm really happy that you're on here today. I'm not much of a bettor myself. I don't do it very often, although a bit of a history in the horse races in my past. But I wanted to present to our viewers today some key points and also the highs and lows of sports betting. So many people doing it, but I thought your expertise would really be a lot of help. Before we get specifically to sports betting, Harley, let's talk about gambling overall. It is a huge industry, is it not? I mean, I see casino games, not only sports betting, lotteries, people running to casinos. Just how big is this industry?
It's huge. After porn, gambling was probably the biggest beneficiary of the internet.
Really?
Before the internet, the mobile phones and the technology that was in place, gambling was predominantly done in Las Vegas and Atlantic City. Those were the only two places in North America. In the early 90s, I want to say we opened up border casinos in Ontario in places like Windsor and Niagara Falls, largely to attract American across the border bettors. It's a common phenomena you see almost everywhere in the world. Gambling brings in great revenue. It also carries a lot of social risks and some potential criminal activity. In the ideal world, gamblers from other places come to your jurisdiction, they lose their money, and then they go home, and their governments have to deal with the social problems. That's why a lot of the casinos in the Caribbean, etc., require foreign passports to enter the casino. They don't want their
Oh,
people gambling and losing money. They want the foreigners losing money.
well,
Gambling was historically in a place like Canada. Maybe you'd play the lottery tickets. Maybe you'd play at a bingo hall. The internet changed everything, and especially the advancements on mobile smartphones. Now you can gamble from a click of your phone, load up money on a credit card very easily, and gamble away. We'll get into the legalities of where it's more or less legal. Right now in Ontario, iGaming Ontario runs the show or runs the operators. The actual operators are all private, third-party licensed guys. BetMGM, FanDuel, DraftKings, Caesars, etc. In Ontario, it's fully regulated by the Ontario government. Almost pretty much the rest of the provinces, it's still what they call the gray market. So there's legal government-run sites, but you can still play with your credit card, and you can play slot machines, you can play blackjack, and of course, the big one that draws the crowd is you can bet on sports.
wow, it's huge. And I know that sports betting is really where you set your attention. So how do you define sports betting? I know it sounds like a weird question, but how would you define it?
Betting on the outcome of a professional or a high-level collegiate game where there's a relatively deep market and a liquidity pool. So let's start with sports betting. Most popular day of the year by far is the Super Bowl. The Super Bowl, betting on the Super Bowl in some way, shape, or form is something that, along with March Madness brackets, which is number two, have been socially accepted for a long, long time. Barack Obama, when he was in the White House, was a big basketball fan, and he produced his March Madness bracket and released them at a time where gambling was not legal in DC or anywhere else, yet office pools have existed for a long, long time. Again, with the technology and the internet, it used to be somebody in the office had to create a bracket, photocopy it 100 times, and track the results paper and pencil. Now, for a small fee, I think they charge a small fee. They could even do it for a freebie with user signups. CBS Sports runs most bracket and March Madness pools, and you can create your own private pool, invite just your friends and family or whoever you want to invite. You collect the money, they administer the pool for you. So, again, the internet allowed the scale. The same way poker stars can run tournaments now online, $5 tournaments with 10,000 entries. The scale you can get to online is staggering. But the Super Bowl is the easiest place to start. It's the biggest bet on event of the year. If you talk to an illegal bookie or the legal site, what goes on the Super Bowl is like nothing else. If you talk to an illegal bookie, his barber and his cousin's wife and everybody else is calling him that morning. His phone blows up the night before on the day of the Super Bowl because people want to make a bet on the Super Bowl. The two biggest sites, FanDuel and DraftKings, have both had their sites crashed right at around 6:20 p.m. right before the Super Bowl because there's that much activity.
Wow.
And you can bet on any event. I mean, the Super Bowl is just an easy one to start with. You can bet who's going to win the game, You can bet there's something called a point spread. So, for example, if the Kansas City Chiefs are the favorite in the Super Bowl and they're a 4.5 point favorite, they got to win by 5 or more. If they win by less than 5, even if they win the game, the other side would win. You can bet on the over-under. You could always bet on silly little things. In Ontario anyways, every jurisdiction has different rules for what we'll call other types of bets, like the Academy Awards, who's going to be the next president of the United States, what color of Gatorade is going to be dumped on the winning coach. Things like that, it depends on the jurisdiction. But what happened online was they could start offering thousands of fantasy type bets or prop bets. How many completions will Patrick Mahomes have? Will they show Taylor Swift in the audience? How many yards will Travis Kelce catch for, etc.?
Wow. It's unbelievable. There's a myriad of opportunities. Harley, it seems like one could almost bet on anything if there's an interest in betting it.
Old adage is, if there's a market, some entrepreneur will commercially find a way to make it viable and let you bet on it. The Super Bowl, there's always NBA games leading up to the Super Bowl, so they usually try to tie in really funky combo bets. So if LeBron and the Lakers are playing that afternoon, you could bet on what's going to be higher, the amount of points LeBron scores or the amount of points the Chiefs score in the Super Bowl.
God. Oh my God. Now, you talked about the people where you can make your bets. How do you know what's a legal one and what's an illegal one? And if people aren't used to betting, but they want to, where should they go?
Great question. So in Ontario, that is now a licensed jurisdiction, the sites that are legal and regulated by iGaming Ontario will all have some form of sticker or stamp near the top that says iGaming Ontario.
Ah, okay.
Having said that, a lot of the sites that operate elsewhere are licensed somewhere. So they're not, and that's why they call this the gray market. They're not legally operating, for example, in Alberta right now or BC. They're, with the exception of the government, you can't legally bet with a licensed site that's licensed in BC or Alberta. But most of them are regulated either by the Ganawaki, which has a site on a reserve, or in Curacao or Malta or Isle of Man, in jurisdiction that for some form of licensing and regulation worldwide.
Wow. So huge. So much to learn. And I think that's something I wanted to ask you about, Harley. Harley, for you, why sports betting? Why not only did you take such an interest in it, but now you're a leader in teaching all about it in betting? What's your attraction to all of this?
So when I was a kid, I liked watching sports. I always had an analytical mind. I was always curious who was going to win and why were they going to win and what were the chances they were going to win. I was always good at math. I was always good at odds. My father used to run a small deli and bakery. I used to hang out there a lot. In the 80s, when there was almost no coverage on this kind of stuff, the Toronto Sun had a phenomenal sports section where they used to post what was called the Roxborough line, which was a big betting odds line and service in Las Vegas. It was in the back page of the sports section. And every day when there were baseball games, you'd see the odds that a team would win. So you'd get a feel for, are the Blue Jays likely to win or not? What are the chances they win? The NFL was obviously king, and they post the lines. And you'd also see the lines move throughout the week. Sometimes the lines would move because there was an injury. Sometimes they moved because the bettor's analysis was such that, oh, this team's got a phenomenal running game, and the other team banged up a little bit on defense or is vulnerable to the run, etc., etc. So I was always interested in it. I was raised to believe that the house always wins, the casino wins, the sports book wins. In the 90s in Vegas, if you walked into a sports book, they'd shower you with free drinks. So, I mean, they had to know they were making money off of you. So I never thought you could beat it till first throw line came along and they didn't move their odds. They created their own games that I used mathematics, Excel worksheets, etc., to figure out how to beat. And in the last few years, even beating a lot of these popular sports books, you alluded to me being cut off. Two of the biggest ones are FanDuel and Bet365. And there was a point in time where I was betting thousands of dollars on games on those sites, and now they won't even accept a $5 bet from me.
Oh my Lord, we'll have to come back to that. That's incredible. And like you said, when you were cut off by these sports books,
They don't use the word, sorry, they don't use the word cut off because cut off sounds bad. They
okay,
limit you for a risk management perspective. So Joe, the blue collar worker making $12 an hour, if he can load up $3,000 on his credit card and go into debt, could bet $3,000 on a game. If I try to bet $3,000 on the same game, they'll only accept $5.
sounds crazy to me, but I'll have to explore that a little bit more. What I've found so fascinating with you, Harley, is your ability to teach people about this and to share. And when I was learning about you, I noticed that you do something called the 5x2 commandments. I was curious, what's the 5x2 commandments?
So I'm going to pull them up because I don't have them by heart. I guess I
Okay.
fail in religious school for not having it memorized. These are my rules for successful sports betting. So let's be clear. Less than 1% of people who bet on sports are going to make money doing it. And probably of that 1%, maybe 5% of them could do it profitably enough that they could grind out a living. So maybe it's 1 in 2,000, probably even less of all bettors could really entertain this as a notion. But these are tips to being a smarter sports bettor. So tip number 1 was focus on winning money, not games, meaning there's usually value betting an underdog. So it's just about math. If you think a team is going to win 35% of the time and they're giving you back $3 for every $1 you bet, your expected value is 5%, and that makes you profitable. If you're serious about this, you got to focus on the long term. It's not that you have a good week or a good month. It's a long-term, very volatile grind. You should see what your friends are doing and do the opposite. Again, the reason Las Vegas has all these beautiful casinos is because your friends are all betting on the quote-unquote favorites or sexy teams, and the value is usually the opposite way. Similarly, you should read what the touts or the media say and do the opposite. The media just knows that Patrick Mahomes is awesome, not if there's value betting him for or against, and he's usually inflated. I want everybody to find the best, safest places to bet, meaning make sure you get paid. If you're an honest person and you pay if you lose, you got to get paid where you win. And you also got to shop for the best lines, meaning if you want to bet against the Kansas City Chiefs and one person has the underdog plus 8.5 and somebody has them plus 9.5, every point in the NFL, even the 0.9 that doesn't sound so popular, comes up every now and again. And it's great when you win because you had the best line. You should honor your bankroll and manage it, meaning if you're a professional bettor and you have $100,000 for your bankroll, you should be betting between $1,000 and $4,000 a game, depending on the edge and the odds you're getting. If you go on a losing streak, you better cut down on your bets. Rule 4B was you should never steam, meaning don't get upset when you lose. Don't start pressing. If you lost 5 $2,000 bets in a row, don't chase and bet $10,000 trying to get it back. Don't get juiced to death. Again, the way the casinos make money is they charge commission or VIG. The more bets you make, the more commission you're paying. And don't cash out most of the time. Avoid uncorrelated parlays and hedging. You're just paying double juice. So those are the general rules that you should be following if you want to take this even remotely seriously.
And I wanted to pick up on that, Harley. I guess if you're really going to do this, you really do have to treat it seriously. It can't be just a little hobby if you want to do this regularly and you want to make money. And I know that you spend a lot of time preparing yourself. You've learned over the years. I know on some bets you can prepare for a while. I take great interest in the fact that this is like an industry for you and for serious bettors. There's work to be done, there's preparation to be done. And I think I heard in your commandments, it's not an emotional thing, winning or losing. You have to take the right steps, whether you win or lose. I think that's what you were saying in your commandments.
100%. And I'll take it one step further. I'm a diehard Jays fan. I've been a diehard Jays fan my whole life. Right after Batista hit the bat flip against Texas, we ended up playing Cleveland to go to the World Series. And obviously, everybody in Ontario was obsessed with the Jays. And in game one, I had plans. I invited all my buddies over. And there was just awesome value on Cleveland because everybody in Ontario wanted to bet on the Jays, and therefore the value was the other way. And I'm sitting in my dining room with a bunch of my buddies, quote unquote, cheering for the Jays when I had a ton of money going on Cleveland. Like anything else, you can't, you got to separate the emotion from it and bet where there's value if you want to do it successfully.
And I think it's such an important point is that you have to take it seriously and you have to know what you're doing to the best of your ability. But the emotion could be left to the side. And that's an interesting story that you just told. I wanted to go back for a minute because we were talking about you being virtually cut off by a number of legal Ontario sports books. But there was an article in the Wall Street Journal, sports betting companies weed out winners. Gamblers want to know why. Can you talk more about that article and how it relates to what happened to you, if it does? Because I was shocked when I heard that a person can be stopped for betting for winning too much.
Most people are. So let's take a step back. This, at the end of the day, is a retail product.
Okay.
And most retail products offer the same prices to all consumers, and that's just the way it works. When you walk into Mandarin Buffet, they charge you a price. They don't deny you entry because you look like a bigger guy who's going to eat them out of house and home. When you walk into the Gap to buy a sweater, they don't size you up and say, you look rich. We're going to charge you twice as much for a sweater. This is allowed in Ontario for gambling sites. And from day one, iGaming Ontario acknowledged the practice and allowed the operators to do this. Some jurisdictions do not. In Spain, the rule is everybody can bet the same amount. There's no cutting people off. In some jurisdictions, there's a little more leeway. In Ontario, they've got carte blanche to predatorily go after big fish or bad bettors, and they're allowed to severely limit you. And it happens quickly. I mean, party something, I don't even remember what they were called, party something, Leo Vegas, like I lasted a week on these sites betting a couple $1,000s a game before I got cut to $3 a bet. So they basically weed out the winners and allow losers who, for the most part, are betting money they can't afford and they're going to lose to bet as much as they want.
Quite a commentary on the industry and
the government who's regulating it.
I was just going to say the government. I'm in the investment world, and there are some eyebrow raising laws and lack of laws that exist in that area too for what people can do. And it's very interesting. So you created the Osgoode certificate in gaming law. And my understanding was that this is such a large segment of the entertainment industry. The annual revenue can be in the billions of dollars. And I guess that the law was required just to help professionals in the industry. Can you talk about this certificate?
I'm going to talk about it then. I'm going to talk about it now because we're doing it again next spring. And it doesn't remotely resemble what it looked like 5 years ago. 5 years ago, when the Osgoode Gaming Law Certificate was first designed by me, and then I brought on Don Bourgeois, who used to be legal counsel for the AGCO, and I have it here and find it. He literally wrote the book on gaming law in Canada.
Wow.
It was largely run by the government and a few First Nations. Now, It's being run through third parties and lots of operators and FanDuels and BetMGMs, and there's a lot more regulation and there's a lot more nuance. Most of the continuing education courses at Osgoode are taken by lawyers who want to brush up on their skills. We're the only course that they ever had where half the people taking them weren't even lawyers. They were managers at bingo halls. They were in marketing or consulting, working with casinos. There's a lot of requirements and regulation around who can work with a casino, even supplying things as mundane as food, and definitely supplying things like poker chips and cards or slot machines to a casino requires a lot more supplier regulation, rules, and licensing than if you were going to do it for most businesses.
Wow. Incredible. And along those lines, weren't there recent changes in Ontario's gambling laws? Perhaps back in 2022?
Yeah, that's where iGaming pretty much allowed, iGaming Ontario and the Alcohol and Gaming Commission of Ontario allowed third-party sites, FanDuel, BetMGM, DraftKings, Caesars, to come into play before it was just Proline.
Oh, I understand. Okay. So, and that was back in April 22 or something, I think. I remember at the time it was news. It was news.
Yeah, well, and then the hockey playoffs started around that time, and every ad during the hockey playoffs was from a gambling site.
Very, very interesting. I was wondering, has crypto crept into this whole business? Are people able to pay with crypto?
Yes, in certain jurisdictions and certain sites. Crypto was always huge for black market bookies because it was just an easy way for them to move money around. There was a joke kind of going around that if you were a big black market bookie before COVID, you were holding about 50 to 100,000 in Bitcoin just to manage money that you were moving around. During COVID, betting slowed down or stopped. Bitcoin went up like tenfold, and there's jokes that there's bookies that just retired because their $75,000 or $100,000 float became worth $1 million plus in Costa Rica.
Jeez. Oh my God. Huge. Hey, I was wondering, Harley, when you win, whether it's a small amount or a big amount, you're probably not going to get a T4 tax slip from gambling company. How does CRA look at the winnings? Are you supposed to report them or what happens?
Okay, so let's start with one of the biggest differences between the US and Canada is lottery winnings are not taxed in Canada. So if you win $50 million on Lotto Max, you will go down to the OLG. You will be interviewed and scrutinized because they want to verify you're the rightful winner. When they establish you're the person that bought the ticket, you did it with your money and you're the sole winner, you will get a check for $50 million that you can deposit into your bank. In the US, when they announced Powerball at $300 million, for starters, that's over 30 years. So if you want the cash prize, it's like $130 million, and you are taxed at the source, and you probably come home with $70 million. So the taxation is very different. The only time in Canada that you might be taxed where they go after you is if you're deemed to be a professional gambler. And the rules around that are such that about, I want to say 15, 20 years ago, there was an Ontario Court of Appeal case called LeBlanc versus the Queen. The LeBlanc brothers were very sharp in math. They realized they could make money betting Proline. They set up shop on the border of Ontario and Quebec so they could bet on the odds of both sites. They found a convenience store owner that also had a brother with a convenience store in, I want to say it was New Brunswick. It was in one of the Atlantic provinces. So they got odds on a third site. They hired runners. They got kickbacks from convenience stores. They were running a very sophisticated operation. And the Court of Appeal, it was thrown out and determined it was gambling winnings and not profitable. So after that, sports bettors, I would guess CRA is going to be loath to go after a sports bettor again because these guys ran an incredibly sophisticated operation and that was thrown out. On the poker side, where we know a lot more kind of kids that are internet poker geeks that made a living, the way taxes would work is you're taxed on a business, which would mean that if you had losses in a business, you could offset it with your gains. And there was a lawyer named Steve Cohen. He had not winning. He made money in his law practice. He lost money playing poker. He tried to offset those losses against his profits from law because he said he was a professional card player who ran on a bad streak. And the judge went off on him. And what ended up happening as a result of that is many internet poker geeks who were making money as professional poker players then went after their money that they were paying in taxes and CRA and took the money back. So you might find exceptions, but I think CRA has happened to look the other way. There are so few people in Canada who are actually making money betting sports, playing poker, and way more than lose that could use it as write-offs and deductions and this and that I think that if I was consulting CRA, I could explain to them, show them the math, and say, you're better off just staying away from that.
Wow. So interesting. Incredible. Harley, thank you for all this with betting. And I think that you've taught us a heck of a lot today. I'm surprised by the enormity of sports itself nowadays. Not just the betting, but sports. I'm always wondering a couple of questions. Number one, how do they pay these enormous salaries? It's obviously not just coming from ticket prices. So I was curious if you could comment on that.
It's all TV contracts. The NBA just signed a deal for $76 billion over 11 years. Their cable TV would not exist without live sports. When's the last time anybody watched a show on TV with commercials? You're not interested in cable TV. Netflix shows are better. Or you can watch it on Crave type of networks where you just fast forward commercials. The only thing that people want to watch live is the news, which you can clearly get in a lot of different ways besides cable, and sports. Live sports is amazing. Watching the NFL from 1 to 7 p.m. on a Sunday is amazing. PVRing it and watching it later that night, that's a move you maybe pull when your kids are 2 years old and you are obsessed with running that for a short period of your life and you have no contact with the outside world somehow and you don't check any scores and then you try to watch it at night. But that's a very, very small segment, all live. And that's the appeal. It's literally the only thing saving cable TV or commercials.
Hey, would it be all right if I jumped in and asked a question?
Yeah, please come on.
So, speaking of sports and television and how amazingly big those rights are, and I know the NHLs and Canada's are due in a couple seasons, so that's going to be something to pay attention to. I was wondering what you thought of sort of the impact of the gambling commercials. You know, I watched the playoffs with my 15-year-old son, and all he was told was by Wayne Gretzky and Connor McDavid, hey, you should be betting. And that's going to have an impact on a 15-year-old as much as it is on a 41-year-old. So I was wondering your thoughts on that. And then just for my own knowledge, I always hear in those commercials, same day parlay. What's a parlay?
Okay, so I'll do the same day parlay first, and then we'll backtrack to the 15-year-old and the view on that. So the same game parlay was an advent of fan duels that literally revolutionized the market. So a parlay is anytime you're betting on 2 or more events. Historically, it was for people that wanted to put down $10 and bet 5 NFL games, and the odds would multiply. So for your $10, you get 20 to 1, and you can win $200 if all 5 teams won. Chances are it's not going to happen, but for $10, you could get a real payout. What the same game parlay does is let you bet on 6 or 7 things in the same game. So you're from Edmonton and you like the Oilers, so you might bet the Oilers are going to win, that Draisaitl will get an assist, Connor McDavid will get a goal, the goalie will stop at least 24 shots, and that at least 5 goals are scored in the game. and they calculate the odds, and you might get a payout of 10 times your bet. The same game parlays are FanDuel's biggest margin maker. FanDuel's overall margin is 10%, I want to say, and they only make 5% on straight up bets. I'm guessing they make 20% margin on the same game parlay. So long term, they're a ripoff, but it's really fun to bet $5 to win $50 and watch a game and cheer and enjoy, and all the power to you. It's great entertainment. And even if you're giving them 20, 25% kind of quote unquote getting ripped off, it's only costing you a loony per $5 bet on the game. So for $1, you're watching a game for 2-3 hours and getting that much more entertainment value. So that's the same game parlay. With your 15-year-old son, I was actually surprised that he's just asking about betting and I understand I live in a world where I bet sports professionally and a lot of people are asking me a lot of questions. The bulk of 15-year-olds boys that I talk to already have sports betting accounts in their parents' names with credit cards, and they're already loaded up and they're already betting on games. I get texts from mothers who kind of know me from around, and they know kind of what I do, and they know I teach it, and I'm knowledgeable, asking me, what site should he bet on? Or what kind of limits should I put on my 15-year-old? So that's just kind of the reality of the ground. I think that, when Connecticut legalized sports betting, in the following month, they got as many calls for problem gambling concerns as they usually get in a year. I have no doubt that's going to happen. Sports betting, because it's a more complex game to bet on than most things and requires money, disproportionately seems to appeal to white, educated young males. So unlike any other almost addiction you find, that disproportionately seems to hurt the poor and minorities, this one is the opposite. So how that ends up playing out as provinces and states get more and more into sports betting remains to be seen. I'm not sure if more dollars will go after it, because if you work for the government and you live in suburbia, there's going to be neighbors of yours knocking on your door saying, your law caused my 23-year-old kid to go bankrupt or whatever it is. Or if it'll get swept more aside because it's not a DEI type of special interest group being afflicted. That I cannot tell you. I can tell you that obviously Rogers and Bell are under a lot of heat, and I've suggested from day one that the solution to me is pretty simple. Rogers should have a station called Rogers Bets, or TSN could pick one of 1, 2, 3, or 5 and designate it as TSN Bets. And that way, if you don't want your 15-year-old watching TSN Bets, you can block the channel. And on TSN Bets, it's all about gambling. And on all the other TSNs, just tell your 15-year-old he'll be cool if he drives a fast car, or he should eat Big Macs or Cokes or love beer, because that's cool, because, those are the ads he's going to see otherwise during sports.
Harley, I want to thank you so much. I have to ask you in ending this, I'm not sure if I'm serious or not with this question, but I'd love your thoughts. Notwithstanding the 2019 win by the Toronto Raptors, which was glorious, what's up with Toronto teams? Is there a curse about them not being able to win? Because it's amazing to me.
Listen, on average, there's 30 teams in the league. So you hope to win once every 30 years. You just said it. The Raptors won in the last 30. The Jays won 2 World Series in the last 30. So, for teams in the 3 major sports, we're kind of holding our own. The Jays have made the playoffs, even though they stink this year with their big payroll and their management seems incompetent. They've made the playoffs 4 or 5 years in a row, which is pretty good. The Raptors just won. Both the Raptors and the Leafs have both been making the playoffs the bulk of the last decade. It's hard to win championships. There's 30 teams and only one wins it. And sometimes There's dynasties. I mean, hockey saw the Kings and the Blackhawks and the Penguins win probably half of the last 20 Stanley Cups. And the Kansas City Chiefs and the New England Patriots have probably won a half of the last 20 Super Bowls. So once you factor in dynasty, if you're not a dynasty, it's pretty hard to win. And then, I mean, things go full circle. Boston, nothing but cry. It's all about the year 2000. And then the Celtics and the Red Sox and the Bruins and the Patriots just went on a run and kept winning championship after championship. So there's ebbs and flows.
So amazing. Thank you for that, Harley. Well, everybody, we're glad to have Harley on today. We hope that you've had some questions answered for you. Harley, I can't thank you enough. We appreciate you being on the Your Gray Matters podcast. Everybody, Harley's Twitter handle again is @SharpEdgePicks. Please follow Harley. Harley, we'll see you again soon. Thanks very much. And everybody, we'll see you next Monday. Thanks for tuning in. Thanks for watching. If you found it interesting and you liked it, give us a thumbs up. If you're ready to subscribe, click right here. And if you'd like to see another episode, click right here. Tell a friend. Send us a comment. Thanks a lot.